This is a Dragon Blazer production.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Unsolved Comedy, which is going to be an Unsolved Mystery review for the reboot that just came out on Netflix. There will be spoilers ahead of time, spoiler alert, so be wary of that before you obviously listen to this podcast. Make sure you watch the episode of Unsolved Mysteries that we're talking about first. I am your host, Kezaya, and my co-host is
Stephen.
There he is. So basically what we're going to do in this podcast, I think, is my co-host and I will watch an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. I will have watched it previously to be able to do some research on the podcast, or on the case that they're doing for the podcast. And then we'll go through it in the podcast. I'll talk about the case. We'll review the actual coverage of the case in the episode. And we'll go from there.
That is correct. That is exactly what we're doing.
All right. So before we get started on the case, what did you think of the coverage of the case?
Well, first off, we got to bring up that this is not exactly the Unsolved Mysteries I remember as a child.
Definitely not. It's very, very different.
It was more focused. It was focused on one story, one case, a pretty high-profile case, at least in the first episode. I haven't watched any other episodes. It focused on a high-profile case. There was no other stories, and sadly, there wasn't the host with that lovely voice that we all know and love.
Yes, the host is different.
Robert Stack.
Actually, I think something that's pretty cool about this Unsolved Mysteries is that they don't exactly have a host. They let at least for the first episode, which the first episode, like you said, is a very high-profile case. My mom was living in probably Ohio. She was probably living here at the time that the case took place. And this case happened in Baltimore, and she knew all about it when I talked to her before we started recording. But they really don't have a host.
No, not in this first episode. There was no host at all.
They kind of let the people that experienced the case kind of dictate where it goes.
It was a little more of a documentary style than what I'm used to. And I just double-checked, and I was right. Unsolved Mysteries was hosted by Robert Stack, who unfortunately passed away.
Oh no, that's why we don't have a host.
That's why we don't have the awesome host.
Oh, rest
his
in
voice
peace.
was just like
rest
awesome.
in peace.
Awesome. I loved Unsolved Mysteries when I was younger.
I watched it when I was young. I remember watching it with my grandma specifically, and I remember it used to freak me out. But then my favorite thing was that they would have updates. This case that we're talking about today happened in 2006, and it's 2020. And they gave us all of the information, and from what I can tell from watching YouTube videos and reading articles and doing a bunch of research, nothing's changed really all that much.
They haven't. Well, this is a brand new episode. The show just came out, Friday?
What I'm saying is that the case has had no updates since it happened in 2006.
I realize that. I'm saying the episode we just watched is brand new.
Yes, it is.
So obviously they got everything that was, current up until that time.
Yes. I
had never heard of this case before.
I hadn't heard of it, but like I said, my mom had heard of it, and I was actually... There's people in Baltimore that don't know about this case. I was watching a YouTube video by a guy. His name is Dan Bell on YouTube, and he lives in Baltimore. He worked at the Belvedere. He said that he remembered waiting on the man that this case is about at other restaurants, not at the Belvedere, but he waited on this guy, and he had no clue that this case ever took place until recently when it was brought up to him by a friend.
Oh.
So
That's
this
crazy.
case, it's high profile if it's to the right person. Like, my mom's very into true crime, probably where I get it from, but if you're not a true crime person, you didn't have a true crime person in your life, you probably would have never heard of this case because it was just so strange, I think is the word that we'll use. I don't even know really how to describe this case. It's just odd.
It is a very unique and interesting case, based on the episode I watched.
Right. So let's talk about the case itself. The case itself is the case of Ray Rivera. Ray Rivera was a 6'5", 260-pound water polo player. He was Puerto Rican, and he was newlywed to his wife, Allison. We heard from Allison a lot in this.
Yeah, she was essentially our host.
Very much so. But Allison talks a lot about Ray in the very beginning. She talks about the type of person that he was and how you kind of gravitated towards him because he was just a fun person. And I could totally relate to that. I've definitely met people that just magnetic to other people. So I do wonder how somebody like this managed to just slip under the radar, which we'll get into later. But there was no camera footage. There was nobody that saw him the day that all of this took place. And if somebody has a magnetic personality like that, that's not common.
Yeah. No, it was very odd, interesting how he got up there. I will leave my theories for the end.
Yes.
We'll have a theory segment where we talk about what we think could have happened. I will leave that to the end of the podcast when we do that.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about what actually happened. So Ray Rivera was a man who was very into film. He was very into screenwriting. He wanted to be a director. But they were living in Southern California, and what they were doing, the screenplays, was just not pulling in the money, so they moved to Baltimore after their wedding. They had decided that after 24 months of living in Baltimore, no matter what happened, they would go back to Southern California to give Ray the chance to live his dream, which I think is cool.
Spoiler alert. They don't go back to California.
They do not go. Well, she might
Sorry
have.
to ruin it for you people. Sorry.
Like I said, there's lots of spoilers in this. We're literally just going over the case that they go over in more detail. But they moved to Baltimore, and Ray begins working with his friend Porter Stansberry on I guess it's like a financial advice newsletter type deal.
Yes, this Porter Stansberry seems like a very punchable dude.
He is a sleazeball. It's awful. One of the things that Allison mentions in the Unsolved Mystery episode is that Ray's first job was to put out good newsletters. He's a writer. He has no financial backing at all. But his job was to put out good financial newsletters that also had Porter's name on them so that Porter could then rebuild his reputation because he had been investigated by the SEC for fraudulent stocks advice. And from what else I've heard, like I said, I watched that guy on YouTube that I mentioned at the beginning. He said that that company still exists. It's no longer Stansberry and Associates. It's now Stansberry Research. And it's under the Agora Publishing umbrella. And he said that these people literally sit around in a room and figure out what ads to sell you. They're the reason that people in Baltimore have junk mail. That's literally what they do now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm more concerned about the fact that when he was asked if he had any information, they put a gag order on all of his employees.
What just happened?
Technical difficulties, 1 second. There we go. They put a gag order on all of his employees. So this is your best friend since you were 15 years old.
Exactly.
And you refused to do anything to help investigate his death.
Well, the thing is I don't even think, from what I've heard, I have the lead, Michael Bayer, he was the lead detective. He didn't even get the chance to ask Porter if he had any information. The body was recovered. He found out from Allison, and then he put a gag order on all of his employees. The detectives didn't even have a chance to poke around, hey, do you know anything? Gag order, immediately. No ifs, ands, or buts. He already had it out.
I don't know about you, but if my best friend died, I'd like to do everything in my power to find out what killed him.
Yeah, I mean, like...
Seems a little suspicious.
It's definitely
Just a little suspicious.
And his excuse is ridiculous. His excuse, oh my god, it's literally that he didn't feel like the police would treat him fairly because he had previously been investigated by the SEC for fraudulent financial advice. So he felt like he wouldn't have gotten fair treatment, which doesn't make any sense because those are completely different branches of police and law enforcement.
Maybe the police might not treat you fairly because you don't want to talk to them about your best friend since 15.
That's a very good point. So Porter and Allison moved to Baltimore. They decide they're going to leave after 24 months, and things had actually been going really good. At this point, though, this is not mentioned in the documentary. I got this from an article online. I can't remember where I got it from, but I got it from an article. He was no longer actually working at the Stansberry and Associates building. He was actually working on a video that was his assignment. It was a video that he had a deadline for that he was working from home at. So later we'll find out where his car was found. It had no reason to be there. He never went to the Stansberry and Associates building anymore. It just wasn't somewhere he went. He didn't need to. He worked from home. But he obviously, things were going good. He and his wife Allison had listed their house on the market at this point because they moved there in 2004. It was May of 2006. They had about 8 months before they needed to leave on that 24-month pact that they had made. On May 16th, Allison leaves for a business trip. She said she remembered it very well, that Ray seemed fine. He talked. He was kind to her. He took her luggage down the stairs and put it in the car and kissed her goodbye. She went. All gentleman-like. Yes, all gentleman-like. And she was on her way. She doesn't mention where this business trip was, but she said it was a 3-hour drive from Baltimore.
3-hour drive.
She says that she gets to the place that she is doing this business trip at. She goes through her day with all of her business duties, and she gets done and checks into the hotel at about 6 or 6:30, right? Well, she calls Ray. Ray doesn't answer. They're newlyweds. Literally, I think at this point they had been married a couple of years, if not less than that. So they're still at that phase of marriage where they're calling each other all the time. They talked multiple times a day. That is something also that I read, that they talk multiple times a day. They were talking all the time. And he never would go without returning her phone call. So she calls her friend, her colleague, who's staying at the house with them for a few days. And she calls him and she's like, hey, have you heard from Ray? Do you know if he's home? He's not answering my phone calls. And Claudia, who is this friend, is like, actually, no, he left the house a little while ago. There is some speculation if he got this phone call around 5:30 or 6:30. But he got a phone call, and he said, "Oh shit," and ran out of the house. And that is the last time that anybody sees Ray for 8 days. That to me, like, it's so ominous. Like, knowing what happens later, you're like, the last thing he said, like, anybody heard him say was, "Oh shit." Like, I don't know, that's just ominous to me.
I don't know, I think that will probably be my final words.
Oh, shit.
I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm pretty sure "oh shit" is going to be in front of it.
There you go. Stephen's last words. You heard it here first.
Oh shit.
So, obviously Allison's concerned, but she's trying not to panic. She's like, he doesn't ever just leave, so she hangs up, she goes to bed. She gets a call from Claudia the next morning on the 17th at 5:30 in the morning, and Claudia informs her that Ray never came home last night. And to Allison, that's super weird, and actually to Angel, Ray's brother, that's also super weird, because if you remember, Angel mentioned that Ray was not the type to skip out, and even if he did, Allison would have known. There's no reason that he would have not told Allison where he was going if he planned to be gone a few days.
So, just to play devil's advocate here, we're not concerned at all that he was staying at a house with some other woman.
I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that that's a concern, but I guess my thing is that all the evidence is there. So even if something was going on, everything that she said still lines up. They were able to trace the call. They were able to see him in what he had left the house in when they found him. Even if there was something going on there, it doesn't jeopardize the integrity of the case.
So even if he's a cheating douchebag, he is still probably not dead because of his cheating douchebaggery ways?
Highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely.
I just throwing it out there.
No, I get it. And that's actually been a concern that I've heard from a lot of people. Like I said, I've watched YouTube videos, I've read articles.
They didn't mention it at all.
They really didn't. But in some other YouTube videos and things, people mentioned that concern. And even in some articles, they mentioned that concern. They're like, well, he was staying with some lady. Is it possible that his wife found out? Like, you know, I doubt it.
I didn't even think about the possibility that she found out, and she's the one.
I doubt it.
His death is so precise that I don't see how she could
have done it from 3 hours away. She was 3 hours away. She was not in Baltimore at the time, and she wasn't in contact with anybody. She was literally on a business trip. So I don't know about you, but when I go anywhere for work, I am not on my phone because it's not allowed.
I'm just saying that's a pretty damn good alibi.
I mean, I guess, but it's also a good alibi that his mother lived in Puerto Rico at the time. Like, if you want to go down that road, it's a good alibi that she lived completely out of the country.
And then what motive does his mother have?
I mean, you have no idea what their family history is like.
I'm just presenting an opportunity, a possibility of a motive.
And I'm just countering that I doubt it. She wasn't staying there long term. And even if she was.
Well, if she was staying there long term, obviously they'd be cheating, but you know.
No, she literally, I don't know the circumstances, but the day that Allison gets back, which is later on the 17th, Claudia leaves. Claudia completely disappears from the story, which is not something a mistress would do. If I was somebody's mistress, not that I've ever been somebody's mistress, but if I was somebody's mistress...
Please tell me about your time as somebody's mistress.
If I was somebody's mistress, and I lost somebody that I claimed to love, that, I had been going on with this affair with, I definitely wouldn't just ditch. I would definitely stay there and try to help find this person that I cared about, even if it was just as a friend to Allison. This girl dipped. She did not. She lived in New York. She was ready to go. She was like, I'm not playing this game.
I don't know
I'm gone.
if she had any inkling that somebody found out, I'd be getting the fuck out of there.
I mean, that's
true.
Just
get the fuck out.
But I also wouldn't
I kind of disagree with your assessment here.
Maybe. Like I said, we'll talk about theories, but
Not that I've been any mistresses either, but...
I've never been somebody's mistress. Let me just clarify. Stephen's making me look bad here. I've got a boyfriend. I can't be looking like somebody's mistress. So, Allison is on her way back from wherever she was for her business trip, and she calls Ray's mother, who lives in Puerto Rico, and she says, hey, have you heard anything? Ray's mother hasn't heard anything. She calls Ray's brother. She's like, have you heard anything? No, he hasn't heard anything. Okay, so that's concerning. At this point, Ray's brother, Angel, is jumping on a plane. He lives in Orlando. He's getting a plane from from Orlando to Baltimore, and he said that he was on the plane by 1 or 2 o'clock that afternoon. So clearly it was odd enough for Angel to be like, this is weird, I need to be where my brother last was. And then the next day after Ray's brother comes in, his mother comes in, and then so do Allison's parents as well. So by the 17th, everybody's there. Or by the 18th, everybody's there. And Allison begins to start calling people. She said that she called everywhere. She called restaurants. She called his job. She called everywhere. She even called hospitals to check if there were any John Does matching his description, 6'5", 260, Hispanic male, and there was nothing there. They waited for 6 days before they found anything. On day 6, Allison's parents are like, hey. Allison said she gets back from searching the city, and Allison's parents are like, hey, we're going to go look around town in parking lots to see if we can find Ray's car, because if we find Ray's car, he shouldn't be very far behind, right? Logical frame of mind.
Hey, in fairness, they're right.
I mean, that's true.
He wasn't too far away from his car.
Jeez, thank you, Stephen, for that. But they go out looking. I think they said in southern Baltimore, in Mount Vernon is the neighborhood, and they find his car in a parking lot near Stansberry and Associates, but also near a hotel. It's not a hotel anymore now; it's condos, but called the Belvedere. Now, side note, we're going to drift off a little bit. The Belvedere is its own weird entity. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Belvedere Hotel in Baltimore. Have you ever heard of the Belvedere Hotel?
I've heard of Mr. Belvedere.
I don't think that's the same thing. So the Belvedere Hotel has its own weird history. The same man that I watched on YouTube, let me see if I can find his name one more time, just so that I can, because a lot of this information is coming from him as far as the history of Baltimore. His name is Dan Bell again. And he said that he worked at the Belvedere. Like I said, he said he remembered waiting on Ray, but he worked at the Belvedere Hotel. He said that the Belvedere Hotel was freaky. It was weird. There was so much weird stuff going on the top floor, which, as we'll go into later, is where Ray would have had to be to get onto the top roof. He would not go up there by himself. He quit his job because he didn't want to go up there by himself.
Okay, so now I'm intrigued.
Yes.
What kind of weird stuff are we talking?
So, according to him, there was a young woman. He said he thought she was Jehovah's Witness that worked with him. I guess there was a restaurant in the floor of the Belvedere and a nightclub on the top floor at this time in 2006.
So, ghostly bartenders?
Well, yes and no. So, according to this woman, the reason that she wouldn't go upstairs, because literally the only reason that they had this guy hired is because he was the only person willing to go up after hours to the 13th floor to fill glasses.
Oh, that's already a thing. 13th floor.
It's already bad.
Right, that is... Isn't that the...
It's like
don't most hotels they skip the 13th floor?
Most
because
hotels
of
do, which doesn't make sense to me, because just because you name it the 14th floor doesn't eliminate it from being 13th floor.
No. I don't know why you're bringing logic into superstition. I don't need your negative attitude.
Sorry. But this woman said that she went up to fill glasses one night after hours when all the bartenders were gone. And the elevator door that they have to take up, which is an employee elevator, opened on its own and there was nobody in it. Okay? Start there. So she looks and she's like, that's kind of strange. So she goes back to filling the glasses and this door opens. The door that Ray would have had to go through to get outside opens. And she goes to close it, and she sees this guy there in, like, old-timey clothes. And she says, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Can I help you get anything?" And he doesn't say anything to her. She turns around to see her way out, because obviously she's a young woman in an after-hours nightclub all by herself, and this guy's just there. She turns back around to look at this guy, and he's gone. Not there. Doesn't exist. Gone.
So, I've got this. I've solved the case.
It was ghosts.
It was a 1920s era bartender named Manuel that threw him off the roof.
I don't think that that's what happened.
Yeah, he just like hovered over and just...
Well, like I said, this guy has his own experiences with the Belvedere. He said that he quit his job because he went up there one night and a bunch of glasses fell. And he just left. He said he was not staying because they were far enough off of the bar that they shouldn't have fallen. Something made them fall. So... he left, he got written up, and then on purpose, his manager sent everybody home but him so that he would have to go up to the 13th floor by himself, and he quit his job because he said he would not do that again.
That's just a bit of a dick move right there.
It really is. He said he hated her. I was like, wow. But then he also mentions later that, like, even though the Belvedere has all this, like, weird stuff around it, it's still pretty expensive to live there because there's like condos and shit in there, and it's fucking expensive. He talked about he looked at a condo in the Belvedere, and he said that alone, the condo fees, which are like the upkeep fees for the building that your condos are in, alone, those were $1,100 a month. A month. And he said it's because they don't do a lot of renovations. There's a lot of exposed brass in the building that they have to polish. So... it's got its own little freaky backstory, the Belvedere Hotel does. So I just wanted to make that a point so that when we talk about the Belvedere Hotel, you can understand why, if you watched this episode, they kind of paint the Belvedere in a creepy light. Because it kind of is a creepy little building.
Did they talk about Manuel?
They did not talk about Manuel. I am so sorry to inform you.
He ran the speakeasy at the Belvedere. I mean, it's just...
I don't think it was a speakeasy. It was literally like, you were alive in the early 2000s. Like, you were probably having your children around that time, I assume. So, you know what...
I didn't have... I guess I helped a little bit, but yes, my ex-wife was having my children around this time.
But, you know what an early 2000s nightclub was like, you know... I mean, if it's any indication to you, look at the pictures.
No. Okay, we have a misinformation here.
Okay.
I was having children in the early 2000s with my ex-wife.
Oh, you weren't going to
nightclubs? So I wasn't going to nightclubs.
Well, I mean, you could even look at the pictures of, like, okay, case switch. Look at the pictures in the Casey Anthony case of her clubbing. The clubs have a weird, like, they just have this vibe. Like, they all have glow sticks. They all have, like, weird shit going on, which is fine.
We did like some glow sticks in the early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, that's the kind of shit that was going on in this nightclub. Back to the main point of this. They find his car in a parking lot pretty much in between the Belvedere Hotel and the Stansberry and Associates building.
Yeah.
Which he doesn't work at anymore, so there's no reason his car should be there. But I digress.
Well, he wasn't there. He was at Ghost Hotel.
He was at Ghost Hotel. But they do find Ray's car, and they find a parking ticket on it. The parking ticket is dated the morning after Ray goes missing. So Ray goes missing.
That parking cop hates himself for that. It's like, man, I gave a parking ticket to dead guy. That is just not...
I bet you that's what he thinks.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta think. This is Baltimore. Baltimore's kind of like, from what I've heard, it's like shitty. It's like kind of like New York City almost, where like the people there see fucking everything. They literally have seen it all. Like, it's just, listen. But
what about a guy torpedoed and through a hole that he has no business getting
okay,
to?
wait a minute. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
I'm just trying to see. Baltimore's seen everything, so...
They have seen everything because they did see that as well. I mean, even though nobody will come forward, but whatever. So, they find this car.
Come forward, Baltimore people.
Come forward, please. I want to know what happened.
Right?
So... They find Ray's car. According to the chief of police, there was nothing of evidential worth in the car. And eventually they did return the car to Allison. I believe it was technically in her name. It was her SUV, but obviously Ray used it to get to and from work and wherever he needed to go. And she said that there's one piece of evidence that was never recovered, and we'll talk about the other pieces of evidence that were recovered, but she turned that car upside down when it was returned to her, and the piece of evidence that she was looking for, which was a money clip, it was like a
Game Boy Advance.
It was a money clip. It was like a family heirloom of sorts. She had given it to him as a wedding gift with his initials carved in it. And that's not the kind of thing that you would leave somewhere. Like, I don't know about you, but if my significant other gave me something on the night of our wedding and we were newlyweds and we were very happy, I would not just lose the wedding gift that they had clearly given to me that was clearly a lot of thought.
I mean, I don't think he lost it. I mean, okay. Now, I don't think this is a simple robbery or anything like that. But
it probably was taken.
What would have a money clip have on it?
Money.
Well, money.
Well,
you know what people like to
money.
take from dead people?
Well, we'll get into my theory about what happened to that money clip in a little bit. But
okay.
I have some theories. Because I actually don't think that Ray died at the Belvedere. I do not.
Oh.
I think that Ray was thrown. And like I said, we'll get into this a little bit later, but I don't think Ray died at the Belvedere.
Okay, so... Huh. Interesting.
So, the next day, after the car is found and recovered, 3 of Ray's co-workers go to the parking garage of the Belvedere Hotel, the top part of the parking garage at the Belvedere Hotel. And I'm going to tell you this. Why would they go to the Belvedere? Like, what in their mind? Like, it just...
I'm imagining they went to everywhere, and that's just... They probably left out, well, we checked this random place, we checked this random place.
They only mentioned where he was.
Don't talk about the places that,
he wasn't.
They didn't find shit at. You talk about the place where you found a fucking hole.
That's true. This hole is also very weird, by the way, guys. We're going to get into why this hole is weird in a little bit. I'm trying to get through this story, and I keep getting distracted. But they go up to the top level of the parking garage of the Belvedere Hotel, and they look over the side towards the Belvedere Hotel. And the Belvedere is kind of a U-shaped building, so there's 2, like, wings on the side that point towards the parking garage, and then there's a flat section along the back. And they look down, and in between there's a second roof that you probably wouldn't think is a second roof. You probably would just think it's like the ground or something, and it just happens to be on top of a basement because it does have 2, like, skylights in it. I just would assume it was like a kitchen type thing, and that was the floor. That was like the floor, but it was the ceiling of the kitchen in the basement. But that's just me. But they look down onto this second roof, and they see a hole. First of all, this hole is not very big. This hole is probably, from what I could tell, it looked to be literally about the size of like a man's shoulder blades. It looked to be about the size of a man's shoulder blades.
It looked big enough for someone to literally go straight, head first, feet first, one of those 2 torpedoed in.
Exactly. It was not very big at all. Not very big. So they obviously call the police, and the police go to, this is where lead detective Michael Baer came in. He goes and he asks this guy Gary, who is like, I don't know, a floor manager or something at the Belvedere. And he's like, hey, can you take us into this area? There's a hole in your ceiling, and we think somebody might be down there because around the hole they said they saw a flip-flop, which Ray was wearing flip-flops when he left the house and he disappeared. So Gary takes them...
nothing more suspicious than a
flip-flop.
6'5" Latino or Puerto Rican man
in flip-flops. But they go into this room, and it's an unused conference room. I believe the floor manager called it the old church space or the racket club, if I am not wrong.
Yes, it was racket club.
And he said the first thing that hit them was the smell. And they found Ray's body in the conference room that had been there decomposing for 8 days, because at this point he had been missing for 8 days.
Ray didn't take a shower before they found him. It was rude.
He's dead! Oh, this is such morbid humor. I am so sorry. But
I told you this was going to be a comedy podcast.
I know. I mean, what was I expecting when you told me you wanted to name it Unsolved Comedy? I should have known. But they find Ray. And they find Ray with his legs pointing towards the door, but when you look at where the body is in comparison with where the hole is, it doesn't look great. Because it looks like he's closer to the wall than the hole is. I don't know if you noticed that when they were talking about it. But it looked like he was right up against the wall with his legs facing the door. And the hole was over a couple feet. I think that hole was completely man-made, and they pushed him through it. I don't think that hole was made by Ray. Or if it was, not the way that they think it was. So, that is the end of the actual case story. That's the end of Ray's story, unfortunately. Very tragic. Now we get into, what are all the details? Jane Miller, a reporter, makes an appearance in the Unsolved Mystery episode because she said she covered the case a lot when it first came out. And one of the things that she mentions is that the hole is very, very strange. The hole is very strange. When you look at the hole, it is 43 feet from the point that he would have had to jump off of at the Belvedere. And it's 20 feet from the parking garage. And the parking garage is only 20 feet high. So that hole's strange. Let's talk about the theories behind the police right now. The theories that the police say happened. The first theory is that he jumped off of the roof that was above the second roof. This would be the roof of the actual Belvedere Hotel, the big roof, 43 feet down. The roof itself is only 40 feet wide. So at its widest point, and there's no open space, it's got air ducts, it's got water tanks, it's got everything. So obviously it's not an open space. But from what I've read, Ray would have had to be running at 11 miles per hour to hit the hole that he hit and make that hole.
Yeah, unlikely.
Very unlikely in flip-flops.
He essentially would have had to be an Olympic-style swimmer that could do a run, jump, and then shoop,
literally, and
dive into that hole.
Oh yeah,
that's a lot of work for someone who just wants to kill himself.
Exactly, when there's like so many easier points. And like we mentioned before, it would be really, really weird and difficult for Ray to get to this part of the hotel. The roof of the hotel is, you have to go up an employee elevator to get to the 13th floor. You have to then walk through the nightclub, up a set of stairs, and out a door that leads to the roof. So that one's difficult to get to, and from what we heard from Angel, who's Ray's brother, you can't just walk in off the street and walk through the lobby of the Belvedere up into the nightclub at the 13th floor. Like, you have to know people there. You can't just be some random Joe Schmo and walk into the Belvedere. They have people living there. They have offices. They don't let that shit happen. The second theory is that he jumped from the parking garage, which didn't happen. It didn't happen.
There's not enough velocity.
There's no way.
He wasn't high enough to make it through that roof.
The parking garage...
It just would have probably hurt a lot.
Yeah, exactly. He definitely probably would have survived. But he would have had to jump 20 feet to the hole and then fall 20 feet straight through the hole.
Yeah, it's just not plausible.
Doesn't make any sense. So that theory didn't happen. I don't think any of these theories happened. Let me clarify.
Then there's the ghost throw.
No, there's no ghost throw. The cops didn't talk about that. The 11th floor ledge is the final theory that the cops have. And the 11th floor has a ledge that comes around the building. This building was made, I don't even know the year, but it was big in the 1920s before the Depression. So, it obviously was built in the early 1900s when that ledge style, that ornate ledge style was very, very popular. So they think that Ray walked into the lobby up to the 11th floor, walked into somebody's private property because none of the hallways just opened up onto hallways with a ledge. So he would have had to walk through somebody's private property, whether it be an office or an apartment or whatever, and he would have had to then climb out of a window that only half opened, and he's 260 pounds, 6'5". Yeah, right. And then he would have had to maneuver his way from the ledge to then jump off the ledge. Also very highly unlikely. What do you think of these theories?
The ledge one's the most likely, but still unlikely. I don't think he committed suicide.
I don't think he did either. In fact, when I was talking to my mom right before we watched the Unsolved Mystery case, she was like, just so you know, that was murder. I was like, okay, Mom, let me pour my... Like, thank you, but I mean, I don't know yet.
Like they mentioned in the show, he really didn't seem to have any reason to want to kill himself.
This
there wasn't
is a man
signs before it.
That...
But the biggest reason I don't think it's suicide is, even though that seems to be what the cops are willing to just say, it's suicide, it's fine.
But you know what that says to me about the cops?
Sprinkle some crack on them and let's get out of here.
Sprinkle some crack on it. But you know what that says to me about the cops is that they were somehow involved. Yes,
they were paid.
Somehow involved.
They were involved or they were paid. Like, it's super sketchy. And they fired the lead detective off the case.
Yes, they did.
Who actually was
trying
to...
They didn't fire him.
Oh, I'm sorry, transferred him.
They did. They transferred Michael Bayer after 3 weeks on the case. And he said, in his own words in this Unsolved Mystery episode, that he was the only person on the homicide floor that believed that Ray Riviera did not die from suicide. He believed he was murdered.
Well, I'm just saying there's a lot easier ways to kill yourself than somehow torpedo yourself into a hole that everybody would have to figure out how to do it.
Well,
Not to mention there's no suicide note.
Exactly.
He was married. He supposedly loved his wife.
Well, you have to remember,
note.
In the episode on Unsolved Mysteries, Allison does mention that there's no reason he would want to kill himself. He was very excited for the future. He wanted children. He wanted things that people who want to kill themselves don't want. People who are preparing to kill themselves don't want ties. If he was at a point in his life where he wanted to kill himself, he wouldn't have gotten married because that's an extra tie. He wouldn't have been preparing with Allison to have children because that's an extra tie.
That one I agree with. In fairness to our knowledge, for all we know, he was happy when he got married, and somehow his marriage got soured. I don't think that's what happened,
no.
And I don't think it was suicide because once again, he went through a lot of extra steps to kill himself. If it was suicide, so
yes,
I'm like 99.9% positive this is not a suicide. This is a murder of some way.
Yes, it is. Now, to justify your point, let's talk about The autopsy. Ray's autopsy. Ray's ribs were fractured in multiple places. He had punctured lungs. He had lacerations, a lot of lacerations. That is one thing that Michael Bayer makes very adamant, is that there were a lot of lacerations that went from about 7 inches to 9 inches. He had skull damage, and his legs were broken in 2 places. Most of those injuries are consistent with a fall from an extremely high height, i.e. 43 feet down. But the one thing that the medical examiner can't explain were the leg breaks. They weren't broken in a way that was consistent with a fall. And that's something that she told Allison. Allison went to the medical examiner when they tried to close the case and tell her that it was suicide. And the medical examiner said, I know what they're trying to do. We're not closing this case. His legs were broken in a way that are not consistent with a fall. This case is not going to be closed. And then she signed on the cause of death being undetermined, which means that this case never closed. Never closed. This case is still open to this day, even though the police department likes to act like it's closed. And from what this Jane woman said, Jane Miller, she said that as a medical examiner, when you sign off on an undetermined cause of death, it means you don't feel like you have enough information. We have to remember that Ray's body was decomposing for 8 days. A lot of evidence could have been gone in that decomp of 8 days.
Yeah.
What do you think?
You want theories now?
I do not want theories. I want what you think about his injuries.
I mean, I'm not a medical examiner.
I mean,
but yeah, it's like I said, it sounds like somebody broke his legs before they tossed him in.
You're getting there. You're getting there. You're getting to one of my theories now. And on top of that, Michael Bayer, the lead detective, again, said that everything looks staged because what we haven't talked about is what was found around the hole that Ray supposedly fell through.
Well, other than flip-flops?
Other than flip-flops, there was a cell phone. And yes, it was a Nokia brick, but this cell phone was in perfect working condition. It didn't have a crack. It didn't have a break. It didn't have any chips. It was perfect. Literally as good as the day that he bought it, pretty much. And it was just set there. You wear glasses. Tell me, buddy, if you were to drop your glasses off a 43-foot tall building, what would happen to your glasses?
I would cry.
I would cry.
And they'd break.
His glasses were laid right next to the hole. Perfect. Not a scratch on them, as Allison says in the episode. Absolutely perfect. The only thing that is damaged at all is his flip-flops, where there's some slight drag marks on one of the flip-flops and the other flip-flop is broken. But I don't understand how you would break a flip-flop doing that. But like I said, the lead detective thinks
if you're being dragged.
That's true. The lead detective did say that it looked staged. And then obviously we talked earlier about the money clip. That money clip was not found on Ray's person or with the rest of his things around the hole.
I mean, if you think about it, broken legs. He had his legs broken. And then if he was dragged with his flip-flops still on, could easily have somehow got the scrapes and also got the broken flip-flop.
Yes, he could have. The other thing that's strange is, like we said, this guy radiates humor, right? That's what his brother said. Like, he's just got that personality. People gravitate towards. The night that Ray supposedly went up there and did the deed, nobody saw him and nobody heard anything, which is completely mind-boggling to me. I don't believe that for a second. If he went through that roof, somebody heard something, but nobody heard anything. Have you ever listened to 911 calls when somebody's jumping from a roof like they're killing themselves and they're calling 911 beforehand, or a suicide line?
Sure.
When you listen to that and you hear them hit the ground, it sounds like a fucking meteor hit. Like it's loud. You can hear that shit. So you're telling me that this man jumped from 43 feet down through a fucking roof, no less, and nobody heard anything? They didn't even hear a thud. They didn't hear a, nothing. And it just didn't hear anything. Just normal night, I don't understand. And on top of that, the cameras on the rooftop that night, which are the cameras that they would have needed to prove that Ray killed himself, were not working that night. Of course not. And there was no footage of Ray in the hotel at all. No footage. And CCTV was everywhere in the early 2000s. Everywhere. The police immediately said that it was suicide, despite the medical examiner's undetermined cause of death. They stick to that story to this day. So that says a lot to me as well.
Douchebags?
Yes, douchebags. Now let's talk about the note.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember hearing about the note?
I do.
The note was weird. The note was folded up to about 2 inches long, put into a Ziploc bag, and then taped to the back of Ray's computer, which is a really odd place to put something. Like, just to be real, like, if I wanted somebody to find this piece of writing, or if I wasn't done with this piece of writing, I'm not going to tape it to the back of my computer, which is what everybody in the police department tries to say, except for this lead detective, is that, it was just some profound writing. He was a writer, wasn't he? That's not where a writer puts their writing. Like, I don't know if you know any writers, but typically writers want to display their writing. They want it, like, laid out so they can come back to it and read over it again. But this note was folded up, very small, and taped to the back of the computer. And Allison says that she knows that the note was written that day because she found scraps of the note in the trash can. Like, Ray had written it and taken pieces out, and she found scraps in the trash can. The note included Freemason references, family names. She said they were missing some significant people. Actor names. Some of them were deceased. And movie titles. Some of them were
there
his
was also
favorites.
Directors.
Yes, there was also directors. Good point.
Did you know the directors?
I did not know the directors, but I remember hearing that there were directors.
Well, the big one was Stanley Kubrick, who who was the director of The Shining. I believe it was. He's done a lot. 2001: Space Odyssey.
So a lot of movies that I never saw The Shining. So
he was also this very. He was a rough director.
Okay.
He did a lot of. I believe it was on The Shining. Shelley Duvall.
Yes.
Who plays the wife in The Shining? Hated him. He treated her like.
So he was one of those types of guys that, like, it's my way or the highway, and you can get the fuck off my set.
Not so much that. It was, he wanted her to be genuinely afraid. So he did everything in his power to make her afraid.
Ooh, that's weird. That's freaky.
He wanted genuine emotion.
Okay.
He would do a take like 137 times just to get the right take.
Yeah.
He was...
kind of a dick.
Kind of a dick. Good director, but kind of a dick.
Yes. Now, one of the things that is brought up is that the FBI says that this is, yes, a very unusual note, but it is not a suicide note by any stretch of the imagination. They said that it is not a suicide note. And another thing to mention is that he had shrunk this down. This note was written, and it's only about this big. It's literally yay big. It's not very big. So he had, and like when we looked at the Unsolved Mysteries episode, Allison had like 4 pieces of paper. This thing should have taken up 4 pieces of paper. But it didn't. It took up one little sheet that big.
Yeah.
So he shrunk it down. And some people think it might have even been written in code, but nobody's been able to crack it yet.
That's what I think.
I think so too.
If it's at all significant and not him just working on something, it's a code.
If he was just working on something, then why was it taped behind his computer? I think that holds the key to what happened to Ray. That holds the key. Is that note if we could figure out.
I think the
how to
key is
decode it.
finding the person that killed him.
There is also one thing to mention is that he had bought, the day that he went missing, he bought a copy of a book called Freemasons for Dummies. So a lot of people assume that maybe he was trying to join the Freemasons in some way.
Or investigate him.
Or investigate them, yes.
He's
Allison
dead.
did say he was into secret
I think it's more
societies.
likely he investigated them.
Yes. There is a couple of other things to mention that I just have like random little pieces in my notes. Ray and Porter, if you don't remember, Porter is the man.
Douchebag, best friend from 15,
Yes,
since he was 15.
he was Ray's best friend from the age of 15, who, at first, he was very supportive. He put up a $1,000 reward for any information regarding Ray. But as soon as Ray's body was found, Ray no longer wanted to cooperate with the police, and he put a gag order on every single one of his employees. Like a fucking asshole.
Douchebag.
Just a thought. But Porter and Ray were on the same swim team, and they went to prom together, so they were obviously very, very close. And the report that Ray wrote for Porter was called the Rebound Report, and it had to do with stock tips, like stocks that were down at the time but were going to like bounce up. And
yeah, it was predictions of which stocks would possibly, you could buy cheap now and
sell for a lot later.
Which
all of his information had to be coming from Porter, because we know that Ray had no interest in financial anything. He was literally just doing it so that he could have a writing job, right? The other thing to mention, and this is creepy as shit, I apologize, it's gonna give you chills, it gave me chills. The day before Ray went missing, the alarm went off at their house at 1 o'clock in the morning. And this alarm, Allison said, had never gone off before. And they had lived there at that point for close to 2 years. You know, you gotta think, probably about a year and a half. This was May. They were planning on moving in December, so they had lived there for a while and this never gone off. Well, she calls the cops out, and the cops say, well, it's probably just a squirrel, right? Except that the night Ray goes missing, when it's just Claudia in the house, the same alarm goes off at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Same time.
So she mentions this to police, and they're like, it doesn't seem like it's anything significant. So they completely ignore it, which I think is the stupidest fucking thing a cop can do, is ignore any information that's given to them by...
Or, they're paid off.
Or they're paid off.
They had something to do with it.
And on top of that, a lot of people mentioned to Allison to be careful. What do you think that she should be careful of? She said she thinks Ray maybe found some information that he shouldn't have found.
She should be careful of the information that he found, and that she doesn't end up the same way.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, that hole would fit her too.
That is the end of the case talk.
Theories.
Alrighty, so now we're into the portion where we can talk about theories. Like I said earlier, I think all the theories that the police came out with were bullshit, so let's come up with some that actually make some sense.
I have things to say about this.
Okay, go for it. I will let you go first.
The first theory is Manuel throwing him off the roof because he's a ghost and he has ghost powers.
He has ghost powers.
My second theory, which you kind of ruined a bit.
Sorry.
But it's still possible that it could have been done after the fact, is he was in a helicopter and he was tossed straight down from a helicopter.
I feel like that'd be too precise, though. Like, this is too precise. They did it in a purposeful place. Because I
was just trying to think of any possibility that would be consistent with him falling off. How would he be able to drop straight down?
Right.
Because everywhere else around there is unlikely.
I mean,
the one idea would be as if he was thrown from a plane or helicopter and he went straight down.
Right.
But the whole throwing his phone, his glasses, that was done after the fact, and it's more likely that he was Now, I'm not sure how they made that hole.
Now, here's the thing. I have a couple of theories on this myself. The helicopter theory is one that I had, but I don't believe that they would... I don't believe that... Like I said, I don't think that Ray died in that
Helicopter
hotel.
theory also fits if we also think that the police not only was covering it up, but was involved.
Yes.
Because the police would have a helicopter.
Well, and you got to remember that Porter Stansberry is a very rich man. To this day, he still owns that company. He's a very rich man. It's not beyond the realm of possibilities to think that he might have some kind of aircraft.
Yeah, I don't trust rich people.
I don't trust rich people. Like just all rich people, or just this rich person specifically? Okay.
Specifically, especially this one.
All right. But no, I think that Ray might have been dropped somewhere. My mom brought up the fact that Baltimore is kind of near some mountains. So if he was dropped somewhere else and killed and then moved to the Belvedere because that's where his car was, then I think that would make a little bit more sense, because they literally would have only had to make a hole big enough for him to fit through.
Also, other theory, he was being chased, ran off the Belvedere, cartoon style, not realizing that he was in the air, and then he looked down and fell straight down. All Looney Tunes like.
I mean, I guess, but like, I don't know if I would say that cartoon physics apply.
He found out that Acme Corporation
was sitting on a gold mine.
Yeah, he found some
mine.
secrets about Acme Corporation, who's run by his best friend. And yeah, cartoon physics apply if you find out about Acme.
If you find out about Acme Corporation,
yeah, absolutely. So just the helicopter thing.
Just the helicopter. Okay, I have a couple of theories. One of my theories is that, like I said, I don't think he died in the Belvedere. Do I think he went through that hole? Yes, I think he went through that hole, but I don't think he died in the Belvedere. The way that he would have literally had to come through that hole, like he literally would have had to pull one of these. Like that they have you do when you're going down a big water slide where you cross your arms over your chest. Yes. He literally would have had to pull one of those and fall straight down to make that hole as perfect as it was for him to fit through. So I think that he was either dropped from an aircraft somewhere else and then moved to the Belvedere, or I think that maybe he went to Stansberry and Associates. And I think that when he went to Stansberry and Associates, he met with Porter. And Porter didn't like something. I don't know what Porter was pissed off about. And I think that Porter had some big guys there because Ray's a big guy. And I think that the conversation got a little bit out of hand, and Ray decided that he was going to quit working for Stansberry and Associates. And I think he decided that he was going to leave, and that him and Allison were just going to go to South California. Porter couldn't afford to lose him because he was writing all of his financial advice columns, and he wasn't trusted at the time to write those columns. I think that Porter had somebody break Ray's legs. I think Ray's legs were broken before he went into the building because I think Ray tried to run. And then I think they knew better than to try to dispose of the body that wasn't dead yet at the Stansberry and Associates building. So I believe that they dragged him, which would explain the broken flip-flop, to the Belvedere. They climbed over. Like you said, it wouldn't have been shit to climb over that wall and just drop down. It was no more than 20 feet at the top of the parking garage. I believe that they then cut a hole just big enough to shove Ray through and shoved him through. And I believe he was killed inside the Belvedere. They probably dropped through that hole.
In the Belvedere?
I believe he was killed in the conference room. I don't believe he died coming through that hole, because I don't believe he fell through that hole. I mean, unless, of course, they did kill him at Stansberry and Associates, but I imagine that if you kill somebody in an office building, there'd be some kind of evidence and some kind of...
Or, a bunch of employees that might have information that had a gag order.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, they could have killed him there, too. Either or. Either he died in the Belvedere or he died at Stansberry Associates. The reason I think that he died in the Belvedere is because there was blood that came down the walls of the Belvedere and there was blood underneath him. Was it a lot of blood? No, but there was blood. So I automatically assume that he died where the blood is. Doesn't mean I'm right. I could be wrong. And I think that Porter took the money clip to make it seem like a botched robbery. Paid off the cops, and now it's a suicide.
See, the other problem with that is that a robbery wouldn't go through as much shit that they went through for this.
Right.
It'd be a simple shooting or...
Right. I mean, to be fair, does it make sense? Like, why else would his money clip not be there? Or, that does support the theory that he was killed somewhere else, like maybe dropped out of a plane or a helicopter somewhere else, and they couldn't find the money clip to put with him. Like, they could have lost it while dragging him across to the Belvedere. They could have lost it if they dropped him out of a helicopter somewhere in a field or something. You know, they could have killed him anywhere, and then in the transport of the dead body, lost the money clip, and that's why the money clip was never recovered.
The weird thing is why didn't they toss his glasses, his key, or his phone and everything down the hole with him?
I don't think they thought that far ahead. I assume that when they killed him, they took his phone off of him, and they took his glasses off of him, just to, be consistent. They just picked him up and shoved him in their pockets. And then I think they probably got down to the Belvedere Hotel, the roof of the Belvedere Hotel, after they shoved him in this hole that was barely big enough for him.
I also find it weird.
And remember that they had that shit, and then they had to put it there.
I also find it weird that they never mentioned anything about investigating the phone, seeing if there was anything on the phone.
They did trace the call that took Ray away from his home the night of May 16th. And the call was traced to, no shocker, Stansberry and Associates.
Right.
So, obviously, they said they couldn't track down the call to who made the call because the way that the grid board worked, they couldn't do it. So, I automatically assumed that it was Porter calling him in for something.
Right. I just was surprised we didn't hear more about the phone.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, phones weren't that advanced then. Like I said, he had a
This
Nokia
is 2006,
brick.
fair enough.
He had a Nokia brick. It's not like they're going to go through his text messages. Text messages weren't a thing. He couldn't have internet history on his phone because you couldn't get on the internet on Nokias. I remember my mom had one.
Okay. You've convinced me.
I've convinced you?
I
All right.
kind of forgot the time period.
I mean, it's odd. A lot of times you think about that shit happening, way back in the day when there's, when you think about a murder like this happening where nobody saw anything, nobody knows anything. A lot of times you think about it as, something that happened back in the day when there was no CCTV, no cell phones, no anything. But this was right in between our modern age and the age prior to technology. We live in the age of technology.
Right.
I also think that when they did transport the body, they transported him at night when most of the employees were gone from Stansberry Associates and most of the people that were living or staying at the Belvedere were asleep, which would explain why nobody saw anything. And nobody saw...
See, the one thing that confuses me is it had to have taken some noise, some force to make that hole.
Definitely should have. But I wonder if they, obviously, if I hear banging outside at 1 a.m., I just assume that somebody's probably, doing some kind of construction. I don't automatically assume that somebody's building a hole to shove a dead person through.
No, I would say that it would be less suspicious if he was tossed, maybe he was killed already, and they just tossed his body down from a plane or a helicopter and just one boom thump. But if they were to make a hole, it probably wouldn't be as simple as a thump.
Well, how do you explain his glasses and his phone being completely undamaged?
Also weird. But I'm saying that there would be more noises. They would have to, use sledgehammers or, something loud. And
I mean, not necessarily. It was a metal roof, they said, but when you looked at the hole, it didn't seem like there was a whole lot of metal. They probably could have just stuck a saw in, cut the part that was easy to cut, and then just pushed through or used some kind of
cut,
implement.
Though. They showed the hole. It didn't look cut. It looked like it was broke through. More likely a sledgehammer or something that hit it. It didn't look like a precise cut.
Yeah.
Like, it looked like something went through.
I don't know. I didn't think it looked like something went through because there was still a flap.
Do you think it looked like it was possibly cut with precision?
I don't think it was cut with precision. I think it might have been cut with, just like a couple of dudes in the dark just cutting a basic shape, a basic hole. And they probably had Ray on top of it, so they were cutting around his body. Because, like, when you look at the picture of the hole that they showed us, it had a flap. It had, like, a flap that was, like, clearly on top of the hole, but it had, like, blown over. Which wouldn't have happened if Ray fell through. Everything that Ray would have fallen through would have come through with him.
I don't know about that. I feel like that flap would still be there if he just broke on through.
I mean, potentially. I don't know. I guess that to me, that flap just makes it feel like it's not a natural thing. Like Ray didn't just fall through.
It seemed like something broke through. Like I said, it didn't seem like precise.
I wonder if they broke through from the inside. I wonder if they took.
Didn't look like it was broken through in the inside either.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem like they've been in that area. And plus, it was all the way up there. They would have had to literally climbed up, broke through on the inside, just to throw him into the... No, that's...
But what if they pulled him through? What if they left Ray on top of the roof? Went into the Belvedere, because who's to say that Porter didn't have some kind of condo or office in the Belvedere? So he would have been able to get in, go down to this conference room that he knows is unused because he obviously has been there. Not to say that he's obviously been there, but if he has an office there or a condo or something, he's been there. He knows that this space is unused, break through just enough to grab Ray's body and pull it through, and then jump up through the hole and leave. But first you have to plant his items.
More likely he had never been into that room and he broke through and threw him down.
I guess. I don't know. Like I said, I have a couple
It seems
theories.
a lot of extra work to do it that way.
I mean, you know how it is. Rich people are extra.
I mean, yes, but it just doesn't make sense in my book.
Well...
Alright, so is there anything else we need to say?
I don't think there's anything else we need to cover, but we do want to thank you for listening to our first episode of Unsolved Comedy with Stephen and I here, and we will see you next time.
Oh, don't we want to plug? So, if you would like to message us your theories, you can send us emails on unsolvedcomedy@gmail.com. And then I have a couple pages. I have a fan page on Facebook, Dragon Blazer Productions, also Instagram Dragon Blazer Productions, and Twitter at Dragon Blazer Pro. You can contact me on any of those.
It's super cool, too, because Steven's got a couple of other podcasts that are really good that you guys should totally check out if you decide you're interested in him as, a podcaster. His podcasts are good. He's got a couple on wrestling and one, a Drunk Like Me rewatch. So
it's a Dead Like Me rewatch where we are drunk.
So it's called Drunk Like Me. Sorry.
It's called Drunk Like Me.
No, but he's definitely got some good, shit. If you guys want to go check him out, all for it. If you guys would like to find me, I am Zaya_Pseudo on Instagram, and I am Princess Jimmy on Twitter.
You might want to spell that.
PRINCESSJIMMI on Twitter. And we will see you on the next one.
Hey everyone, I'm Stephen from many different podcasts like Drunk Like Me, Pro Wrestling Apologist, The Rage and Blaze Show, and of course, That Got Dark. So, please like and subscribe